Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome everyone. I'm just going to give everyone 30 seconds or so to jump in. Just while I'm doing that, guys, if someone could just let me know in the chat and just make sure my slides and audio are coming through okay, that would be amazing. Thank you, Lani. Thank you, Sheridan. Cheers, guys. I can see a bunch of people in there. Awesome, guys. Thank you for that. Look, guys, great to be with you today. I love this topic. I think it's great. I think that there's a lot of myths and a few issues with the conventional fire, which we're going to talk about. Just while we're waiting for people to filter in, as we're going through the content today, please feel free to throw any banter or general chat into the chat box. If you have any questions, I'm going to do my best to answer as many of those as I can. Just so that they don't get missed, though, if you could just pop them into the Q&A box, and then I'll address them. I'm going to have some time for questions at the end, but I am also going to sort of get a bit off script and answer questions along the way as well. Alrighty, guys. So look, firstly, I just want to give a big shout out to our event partners for this event, Perla. Look, if you're living under a rock and you don't know what Perla are about, they're up to some pretty cool stuff. They're basically, Perla's key philosophy is very much aligned with ours, which is boring investing for the long term. And we collab on a bunch of content. We don't get any kickbacks or anything like that. We just do it because we know that we are so aligned, and that respectively those guys are doing great work as well. And so if you're not already across them, I would encourage you to check out all of their stuff because they are up to some pretty cool things. Now, for anyone that's new to the event, I'd love if anyone is at one of our events for the first time, I'd love for you to let me know in the chat. But we do a bunch of events like this. There's a whole heap of other content as well. We've just launched events up until the end of the year, and we're about to, Ricky's first time. Welcome, Ricky. Great to have you. A few others as well. Thanks, guys. Great to have you. Lainey, welcome. That Yeah, look, that we do a heap of events. So we've got some more coming up. We're about to release our schedule for the front quarter of next year as well. And so you can follow along on Eventbrite, or you can check that out. They do have a following thing, which I didn't actually realize, but you can follow and then you get notified, which if you like this sort of stuff, we'll make sure that you're there when it gets put up as well. Also, a heap of events, a heap of other content on socials. Ben Talks Money, Pivot Ben on Instagram, and we've got a podcast called the Mo Money Podcast as well. And look, guys, I'm super excited, a bit like a kid in Christmas at the moment, but my third book is coming out next week. Virgin Millionaire. Basically, and I'm going to touch on a couple of the principles that I talk about in the Virgin Millionaire book as we go through today. But yeah, that's coming into the world. I'm super excited for it to get out there. You can check out all the details at pivotwealth.com.au/books. And for anyone that buys in the launch month or through pre-order, that there's a bunch of extra bonuses that you'll get through the resources tab as well. So yeah, would love for you to do that. Any Sydney-based people, we are actually having an in-person event, which you can also see on my Eventbrite. That's coming up next week. So if you want to press the flesh like real humans did before COVID was invented, we're hosting at Pivot HQ. I've got my wife in charge of the snacks, and she's got some good snacks lined up. So if you want to chat money and eat some lovely snacks, feel free to come along. That's next Wednesday. All right. For the lawyers, just before I crack into the content, guys, please don't rush out and make any life-changing decisions off the back of what we cover. Strongly suggest you seek out personalized advice before jumping in. If you're making big decisions and you're deciding on things like your financial independence, probably a pretty sensible idea to be doing that stuff as well. Now, guys, look, when it comes to fire, I think there's a lot of talk out there about this space, a lot of people gunning for it. And I think that is so, so awesome to see. But I get that it's not easy, and like everyone's situation is unique, but there are some common challenges that hold people back. Information overload is one of them. Like you're drinking from the fire hose, so much noise out there, hard to know who to listen to, who to trust. People struggle to find the right balance. And I think this one is particularly critical when it comes to the fire. And it's probably my biggest criticism of the fire movement overall, that a lot of people talk about, let's get financially free and rah, rah, rah. And that's important, great, and something that everyone should be working towards. But the traditional approach to fire talks a lot about you should become financially independent, but you get there by basically sacrificing everything that you can today so that you can build up your investments and build up your wealth faster. And for me, I just think that really just it's a bit of it's like you've got a wasted life, that you're going to look back and maybe you be financially free at 50, but you've wasted your 20s, 30s, and 40s. I reckon that that's not a great outcome. And so in my take, I think finding the right balance between how can you make sure that you are going to be financially independent, that you are going to be getting the results that you want tomorrow, but still enjoying today. And that's the big part of what we're going to talk about as we go through the content today. The third challenge, and it is another big one, is the FOFU, basically the fear of effing it up, the fear of making a mistake that you regret later on, particularly when you're setting a new course of action, setting a new direction with what's going on with your money. Really common people, you get sort of stuck on the starting line because you don't want to do something that you regret later on. And what happens for a lot of people is they end up getting stuck, and it's often stuck not doing nothing. They're just stuck doing the same stuff that they've been doing in the past. And what that means is that they're missing out on the opportunity to be getting better results and getting more out of what they've got right now today. And so that obviously is not ideal either. And so we've found that if you want to nail it with your money, you want to nail it with fire, whatever the case may be, there's three main areas that you really need to get right, which is what I've got up here: your structure, strategy, and your solutions. So structure is all about making it easy to save and making it easy to manage your money. But importantly, and this is critical when it comes to the fire planning side of things, is that it makes it crystal clear how much money you've got to work with when it comes to your investing strategy, your property strategy, your debt strategy, and whatever the case may be. That then ties into the next piece, which is that strategy. And that's like, what are the different pathways that can take you from where you are to where you want to be? You can buy shares, you can buy property, you can crank your super, you can do some sort of combination. So knowing what the right path is for you and then choosing that path and actually following it through is a strategy piece. And the third element is the solutions. And that's the investments and the product solutions that you use to back up your strategy. And here you want to make sure you're getting reliable, consistent progress over time and avoiding the chances of downsides and setbacks and those momentum killing mistakes. So what happens is that if any one of these three elements is missing, it ends up dragging down on the others. It doesn't matter how good your structure and your strategy is. If your investments suck, then you're going to blow up your cash. If you've got a great strategy and great investments, no structure, working with a leaky bucket, it's actually pretty hard to have a great strategy without a great structure in place. And a great structure, great solutions, but you're missing the strategy, you're going to be leaving a whole bunch of money on the table. And so it's not 3 steps. It's just 3 areas that you must nail if you want to get your money living up to its full potential. And so I'm going to touch on these as we go through as well and give you the fire spin on this too. I want to, though, before I get into that, just share this model which talks about the basically getting from where you are today to future state when it comes to your money. And when people think about from getting from where they are to the future with their money, they think about it like a straight line, but it is not a straight line because of the compounding impact of time and money, the power of compound interest, the power of market returns, and the opportunity cost of not taking full advantage of your money. And so basically in the future, every single one of you guys is going to be somewhere on the spectrum of some of you are going to be doing really well with your money, hopefully a lot of you. Some people are going to be doing not so well. And there's this like spectrum that goes all the way from distress up to killing it. Because of this compounding impact of time and money, it's actually a curve in terms of the path that you take to get there. And so we talk to a lot of people, and when we really get into it with their planning, with mapping things out, that they're not 100% on track to end up exactly where they want to be with their money. And if that's the case, if that's the case for you, you need to do some stuff in what we call jump the line. And so when you jump the line, that might be that you start your saving strategy, that you start, being smarter with your tax, that you do a bit more investing, whatever the case may be. But then you've already now jumped the line, you're on track, and then you just need to stay on track. You just need to keep following the bouncing ball to end up in a really good position. But what happens, guys, and this is the real risk, and something, if you take one thing away from today, it's this, is that the longer you leave it, simply the more you have to do to end up in exactly the same position. If you guys have got goals about FIRE, maybe FIRE to you is that you've got 10 grand a month of investment income and that you've got $1 million home that's paid off. For most people, it's something like you own a nice roof over your head without a mortgage on it, and that you've got investment income that allows you to be working out of choice as opposed to necessity. That's the financial independence piece. Now, if you want to have investment income in the future of 10 grand a month, you need to save a certain amount of money today. If you wait a week, a month, a year, 5 years, all that means is that you simply need to save more and invest more and sacrifice more to end up in the same position. And sometimes putting yourself in the best position can become impossible. On the flip side of that, though, is, and this is a note for the hectic FIRE diehards that are listening in, that if you crush it at the start and you put yourself on a trajectory that has you going way up here, you're probably going to get to killing it a lot sooner. But then you've still got all of this time, and you've basically sacrificed this time just to get there just a little bit sooner as well. And so this is what today we were talking about: how to FIRE without sacrificing your lifestyle. Finding the balance here is key. And look, I wanted to share this. It talks about the different stages that people go through with their money, and I think that this is something that's important for people to understand. It's basically the core premise of my new book, The Virgin Millionaire. That talks about the progression that people have with their money. Because, and don't worry too much if you can't see all of the detail on here, because I know that the writing's a little bit small, but it talks about the fact that if you think about getting to killing it and what the ideal financial independence is for you, that you've got enough income that you're living your ideal lifestyle, that you're spending at your ideal lifestyle level, that you've got a deep risk management plan in place, that you're rock solid with all your planning and all of that sort of stuff. But no one starts there. No one starts there. Everyone starts at the start. That's how money works. You start doing a little bit. You start by just saving a little bit of money. Then you start doing a little bit of investing. Then over time, you start doing more and getting more results, and buying property and implementing tax strategies and doing risk management strategies and all those sorts of things. And so one of the most important things that we've found that people need to get right here is that you're making the right move at the right time and focusing on the things that actually move the dial the most. And so we found that there's these 5 distinct stages that people move through, right from the foundation, setting up the building blocks: focus, optimize, accelerate, and impact. And so, for example, when you're just getting started, your focus should be having a regular investment plan so that you've got shares that is automated. You've got automated weekly contributions going in, that you are doing a little bit of tax saving. You've got one strategy in place, saving you $1,000 in tax, that you're saving consistently, that you understand property, that your super is consolidated. But then as you get up to the next stage, the tactics start getting more advanced. And so I put this in to give you some insight, to know that there are certain things that you can do that will move the dial more than others. And those are the things that you want to be focused on. If you want to truly FIRE and you want to get there in a balanced and comfortable way, you want to make sure that you're having maximum impact with the stuff that you are doing with your money. All right. So guys, we're going to get into FIRE basics, and just start at the start. I'm sure you guys probably know a bunch of this stuff already, but we'll basically just build on there and then talk about some of how you actually get there and the advanced tactics and strategies. So the definition really of financial independence, or what we call smart money freedom, is that you've got investments that are covering your ideal lifestyle level of spending, and that you own your own home completely debt-free. And so the how you actually get there is we can use this concept called the 5% rule. Now, the 5% rule says that you can draw an income of 5% from a pool of investments without eating into capital. So what that means in human words is that if you've got $1 million in investments, that you can, did my sound just drop off? No. You guys hear me okay? Kylie says that the sound stopped coming through. Working? Yeah, it's still working. Okay, great. Maybe that's something at your end, Kylie. Thank you, team. So if you've got $1 million in investments, that will give you an income of about $50,000 a year, every single year for the rest of your life. If you had $2 million in investments, that's going to give you 100 grand a year. And so the reason that this 5% rule is important is because it starts to give you a sense of how much money you'd actually need to be financially independent or to FIRE. If I take that example that I shared at the start, if you want a passive income of $10,000 a month, that's $120,000 a year. So you can use the 5% rule to say, well, actually, if I had $2.4 million in investments today, $2.4 million at 5% gives me an income of 120 grand a year for the rest of my life. For the detail people here, that if you're wondering where this 5% rule comes from, the long-term return on the share market is about 9.8% at the moment. So 9.8%, you can then carve off a chunk. You got your 9.8%, you can carve off a little bit for investment fees and product fees. Then you can take out a chunk for inflation, basically. And there's a solid inflation protection in there that leaves you with 5%, or it should be realistically a little bit more than 5%. So what that means is that you've got an inflation protected return. So if you had, to say it in like real words here, that if you had $1 million right now, you could invest that money. That's going to give you an income of about 50 grand a year in the next 12 months. In the following 12 months, that's going to give you an income of a bit more than $50,000 because it's going to be in today's dollars 50,000, inflation adjusted $50,000. So it's going to be like $52,000, which will buy you the same as $50,000 does today. And so you got today $50 grand for the rest of your life. Appreciate that there's a lot of 50 grands floating around in that example, but that's essentially how those numbers stack. Now, one thing that is important that you keep in mind, and I think a lot of people sort of miss this one, is that your own home is excluded from your investment assets. Because while your home, and it's important that you have a nice roof over your head, but your home is not anything that generates you income, and it's not anything that's going to make you any money until you actually sell that property. And even then, it's probably only making money for your beneficiaries, and then it's going to get paid to somebody else as well. And so if you had, say, you think you need $2 million to be financially free, if you've got 1 million of that tied up in your home, you're still only going to be halfway there. So keep in mind that when you buy your own home, you need to not only afford to make the mortgage payments, but you need to be able to pay down the debt on that property and then invest outside of the property so that you can build your investment wealth to create your financial independence. Finding the right balance between how much money you put in your home versus how much you have in investments is really key. And I see this a lot. I'm based in Sydney. We work with a lot of clients based in Sydney, although we've got clients around the country. But Sydney is the most expensive property market in Australia. Now, it's crazy if you want to live, anywhere close to the CBD, and, if you're a family, say, and you want to have a couple of bedrooms, maybe a few bedrooms, maybe a cupboard in the hall, you're probably talking about $1.5–2 million minimum standard in terms of how much you need to spend. And then if you want a, really desirable location with a little bit more space and a little bit nicer, you're talking about some seriously big dollars attached to it. And where we see a lot of people actually go a little bit wrong with this stuff is that they spend so much on their own home that their cash flow is crimped, and so their ability to invest money outside of their home is really quite limited. But then they've also got to pay down this gigantic mortgage and try and build investments at the same time. And sometimes the numbers, they just don't add up. And so you want to keep in mind with your planning that home versus investments really is key. Guys, we are recording the session. We will share this with you guys afterwards. I can see a few comments on that in the chat as well. It's also audio's going onto the Mo Money podcast as well, if you want to get around it. So another concept that's important you understand is what we call your financial trajectory. What your financial trajectory is basically the path that you're on with your money. And I might just jump around for a second, but if you think about it like in this example here, that these different pathways are different financial trajectories that you can be on. And so what this says, if you're on this path, it says if you keep saving at the rate that you're currently saving, investing at the rate that you're currently investing, this is broadly where you're going to be in a month, 6 months, a year, 6 years as well. Now, understanding that trajectory is quite important because it's what allows you to know where you're headed and also to assess the impact of making different changes with your money. So if you keep doing exactly what you're doing, this is how things are going to progress. If you instead started investing more, started paying down debt more, bought an investment property, this is how it works. And that's why you use the trajectory to assess the changes that you're making with your money. That's essentially what I do as a financial planner, is really that with our clients, that we say, okay, this is your baseline. This is the status quo. If you keep doing exactly what you're doing right now, this is where you're going to be in a month, in a year, in 5 years. If we bought that investment property, this is what the change is. It's going to change your cash flow a little bit, but it's also going to change your asset position. And then, does the cash flow work? Are we happy with the asset growth? Is it getting you to financial independence in a time frame that you want to get to financial independence? And so, really important, really powerful. Just share this example that talk about increasing your financial trajectory and basically adding $1 million onto your bottom line by the time you reach age 60. I got this here to just show you the power of time and compounding. That basically, if you want to build $1 million in investments by the time you get to 60, I've got how much you need to save at different ages to actually get there. And so if you're 20 years old today, saving $5.50 a day will build you $1 million by the time you reach age 60. If you're 30, it takes $15 a day to end up in the same spot, $40 a day, $44 a day at age 40, and $161 a day at age 50. And so when you think about your financial trajectory and uplifting it, then you can. But this is what I was sort of unpacking in that example, where it's like the sooner you start, the less you have to do, because $5.50 a day, that's something that's probably achievable for most people. Like $5.50 is a coffee and a bit, or maybe a coffee, depending on where you buy your coffee. $15 a day, that's sort of getting a bit harder, but probably still doable. $44 a day, that's getting a bit tricky. And $161 a day, a lot of people don't earn that, let alone have the ability to save that amount of money. So you have to get started, guys. Now, what do you do in terms of when you get there? That there's basically 3 main areas that you can invest money in. It's the same 3 investment options that are really available to every single person in the country and around Australia and around the world, really, that you can buy shares or manage funds or ETFs using, investment apps or on brokerages or whatever. Buy property. You can invest through crypto and startups, and I put them into the more, I call it the sexy investments category, but higher risk, higher potential returns. So I'm going to unpack each of these in turn and talk about some of the key considerations, particularly when it comes to FIRE with this stuff. Now, share investing is great in that it allows you to start small. If particularly with these investment apps like Perla, and there's a bunch of different ones out there that you can start with as little as $5, and you can invest small amounts regularly over time. You don't need a lot of money to get started investing with shares or stocks. That's a bit of a misconception. A lot of people talk about that and think that you need thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars. You absolutely do not. And so the returns on shares are going to be better than the returns on cash. The long-term return on share investments is about 9.8%. The long-term return on cash is about 4%. And when you factor in inflation and taxes, cash is probably going backwards. Shares are exceeding they're growing in real terms over time. The other great thing about investing into shares is that it's quite flexible in that if you do a budget or if you don't, and you think I can, invest $100 a week, $200 a week, whatever that number is, and I do that today. If something changes in your situation in a month's time or a year's time, you can simply change how much you can invest in. You can dial it up, you can dial it down if you want, and there's no issues there. It's very different to property, which I'll talk about in a sec, where when you buy a property, you need to make that mortgage payment month on month on month. The other good thing about shares is that it's good for income. So generally, with the income return on a share portfolio, particularly in Australian shares, you can get an income of about 6% a year if you structure your portfolio for that particular purpose. That's almost double the return that you'd get on an investment property from a pure income perspective. To say it a different way, if you had $1 million invested into shares and $1 million invested into property, the shares would give you an income of about $60,000 a year. The property would give you an income of about $30,000 a year. And with a property, you can't just sell, a bathroom or a kitchen or an unused bedroom to get a bit of extra cash, whereas shares, you can just sell one share at a time. And so they can be a great way to get started. Got a question that says, if I have $5 million, firstly, well done. Would you rather buy a fully paid off house for $5 million to live in, but with no money to invest, or have a house half paid off and $2 million to invest in shares, etc.? Well, look, it's a great question and an interesting thing to think about, I suppose. And these numbers, whether it's $5 million or $500,000 or $1 million or whatever, it sort of stacks in the same way. But I would be inclined to really look quite closely at the different options and see how they stack. For me personally, I would be inclined to rent an awesome house and then crank $5 million in investments, because I know that if I was to do that for, say, a 10-year period, you get a solid uptick on your on the money, and then you could probably buy an even better house and do it even more comfortably as well. But it depends on your situation and the numbers. And so obviously this is not financial advice, but I think that the numbers really are key. Another question here that said, as of today, would you personally dollar cost average if you had a large amount of money ready for ETF investment, or do you speculate a drop in markets and hold out to see how it pans out, assuming money invested in index funds like the ASX 300? Yeah, it's a great question. I think I just put out some content on this to talking about like timing the market is pretty much impossible unless you get really lucky. And I've seen a lot of people that end up sitting on the sidelines thinking that a crash is coming, and then the market keeps going up and they end up further and further behind. And I have seen some really extreme examples where people feel so bad about the fact that they've missed out and so reluctant to put the money in that they end up just sitting on big amounts of cash for a long, long time. And that gets very, very expensive. That being said, if you had a large amount of money, like say you got an inheritance or something like that, then you probably just want to look closely at what the plan is for that money. And I think that really is key. Like, how long is the money to be invested for? What is the purpose? What other money stuff do you have going on to figure out what's actually there? And that can help to make the decision. Another interesting thing that you can look at, which is something that I personally see a little bit when we get clients that are in that sort of position, is that we look at like the 10-year return on markets versus the 20-year return on markets. And you can see that like on the Australian share market at the moment, the 10-year return is pretty close to the 20-year return on markets, about a bit over 9.5%. And so what that suggests is that the 20-year return is like the benchmark for the long-term return on the markets. The 10-year return is the short, long-term return on markets. When the returns are about the same, you can expect that the next 10 years are going to be pretty similar to the last 10 years. But like we saw this pre-COVID, where the 10-year return was like 12% and the 20-year return was like 9%. And what that says to me is that the next 10 years, it's likely that the returns are going to be under the long-term average to get back to that long-term average. Similarly, after COVID, we saw that the 10-year return had gone down to like 5%. And so you can expect that we're going to have to probably do 15% a year for 10 years to get back to the, almost 10% average long-term returns. Appreciate that there's a lot of numbers that I've sort of thrown at you there, but hopefully that you find that a little bit helpful. Another question here, and I'll move on to property in a sec, that mentioned 5% rule. Thoughts on using a smaller percentage if investing in higher return ETFs like the NASDAQ or S&P 500, having a significant amount of cash buffer to ride out downturns, as NASDAQ, for instance, has more variability. Well, look, you absolutely can. I think that having cash as an emergency fund, as a risk management tool, is something that's really important and pretty much necessary, particularly as you start building more and more wealth. That you don't want to have concerns about if you lose your job, decide you hate your job, something happens like medical emergency or whatever. You don't want to be stressed about that from a financial perspective. But at the same time, my personal take is that you want to minimize the cash that you hold as much as humanly possible. And so if you're investing for 10, 20 years or more, I would say that why are we really riding out the downturns? Like, you probably just want your money to be invested and you want to let the money ride through the market cycles. And that's probably going to give you a much better outcome than trying to buffer yourself. That being said, you definitely want to make sure that you've got your buffers in place so that you've got the emergency fund full and those sorts of things as well. Guys, I'm just going to push on because I'm just mindful that I do have a few slides to get through, but I'm loving those questions. Keep those questions coming. I can see that there's a few more there. I'm going to come back to those in just a sec. Talking about property investing though, when you buy property tends to win over shares. So I love share investing, love it, absolutely love it. But property does tend to win over shares. And the reason the property wins is that because when you buy a property, you combine your savings with the bank's money and invest a much bigger amount than you could do with simply your savings alone. That's called gearing. Anytime you borrow money to invest, you are leveraging the power of gearing. And so property investing, particularly when you're trying to grow your asset base, is an accelerator. It's a great way to grow your investments. On the flip side, and I already mentioned this, that property is less good when it comes to drawing an income off your investments. And so it supports your wealth building. The other big thing with property, cash flow and risk management. So buying a property will cost you money out of pocket. Yes, it does come with some tax benefits, and those tax benefits can be awesome, but you do need to be able to fund the cash flow of the property. Risk management really is crucial when it comes to property investing, but I think that both have a role to play, particularly when it comes to FIRE. And I know that the traditional approach to FIRE is more like buy equities, buy ETFs, and just crank them through. But I honestly feel like if you're not using some level of debt, you're probably leaving a whole bunch of money on the table. You are leaving a whole bunch of money on the table. It's as simple as that. And I get that debt is scary, and I get that it comes with a cost as well. But for most people, that cost that can be handled, that particularly as you start cranking through the FIRE approach, that you should have good cash flow. So the cash flow shouldn't be a problem. You should be able to manage your risk. So that shouldn't be a problem. And then so it's like, well, why aren't you taking advantage of the upside that's just clearly there and available to you? So anyway, that's my 2 cents for what it's worth. I think they've both got their course, and I'll talk about how you can choose the right timing for each of them as well. Last piece I want to talk about though is crypto and startup investing. Look, I put them both in the same bucket because they are both quite similar in a lot of ways, where you've got some high potential upside, but also a lot of ups and downs. I think that they are interesting, but if you look at, like I show that example, build $1 million by age 60, you're saving $5.50 a day. If you start early enough, you don't need more risk than that. You don't need it. I think if you're if you're interested in it, you can do it with a small portion of your portfolio without putting a lot of stuff in risk, but you really don't need it. And if you are interested in it, and personally, I've got some Bitcoin in my investment portfolio, but it started as just a small portion on the side. It's grown a fair bit since then, but it started as a small percentage of my total returns. And I've only ever bought my crypto. I've never sold it. And it just sits there. It's not like if it was to all fall apart, then I'm okay. The rest of my investments are fine because I built the foundation first and way before I started getting involved in the more speculative investments. All right, I'll answer a few questions because I could see there's a bunch coming through here. Thoughts on borrowing against your home to invest in ETFs? Love it. I think it's a great idea. I think, again, as part of a plan, I think that's how you decide, when, how much, and how. But what I like better than borrowing against your property to invest into ETFs is borrowing against your property to invest in more properties, because typically you'd be able to you could borrow against your equity, use that to fund a property deposit, go borrow the rest of the money against that property, and then you've got a $500,000, $750,000, $1 million asset instead of a $100,000 tax deductible share portfolio. $100,000 tax deductible share portfolio is great, but $1 million property is better as long as you can manage the risk and the cash flow. Raj says, you mentioned principal place of residence needs to be paid off with a 5% withdrawal rate. What about investment properties? Do they need to be paid off even when their total valuation is over $1 million? Raj, I'm going to come to that in a sec. That's actually just in the next section, so I might just defer on that one. I started dollar cost averaging, and I'm quite bothered on the tax implications when I want to sell them. It seems to be quite complicated if I need to sell, seeing as I need to match every sale with the purchase. Is there a tool or a process to simplify this? Yes, there are tools. A lot of investment accounts will help with that as well. ShareSite is another one. That's what is linked with the Perla accounts. I know that for sure. I've used them and they've been great. A lot of different ones out there though. So, have a look around at those different tools. But I think the benefits of dollar cost averaging, and I get it, if you're trying to crank it all on a spreadsheet yourself, that's probably a real hassle. But there are tools that will make your life a lot easier with that as well. You mentioned investing in the ASX a lot. Thoughts on US-based ETFs? Then assuming a higher return is acceptable. Yeah, look, I talk about ASX because we're in Australia and a lot of people understand the Australian share market more than they understand global share markets. But I do think that a balanced approach is good. Something around, half Australia, half international, both important. Being investing in Australia because you're spending Australian dollars is good, but we're a small part of a big pond. And so investing offshore is important. Sally and Jason said, if in top tax bracket and have investment properties, do you recommend putting excess money into shares or sit in offset? And is it different whether or not they are in individual names or properties within an SMSF generally? Yes, it is a little bit different, I suppose. And look, my take, and again, not financial advice, and you should confirm all of this, but look at what is the actual plan? Because normally when people first buy a property and your debt is high and your cash flow is pretty much at its lowest point, sometimes having more of a cash buffer can be quite valuable for you. Whereas if you fast forward and say you're 5 or 10 years down the track and you've paid your debt down, your debt is at a comfortable level and your cash flow is strong, then I'd probably be more inclined to be investing money into equities and those sorts of things. Hope that helps, guys. Got one from Jason. A recently chatted financial planner suggested if I invest in ETFs, I may as well send extra money to my super, as it essentially achieves a similar investing model as well as the tax benefits. Given the larger amount of money in super, your compounding here is more beneficial. They also suggested if I wanted to invest in shares, I should do so in individual stocks. What are your thoughts? Look, the first part about the tax benefits of super, bang on, 100%. The tax rates inside super are the lower than investing in your personal name. And super is the most tax effective place that you can be investing money. Only problem with that is, though, that when you put money into super, it's stuck there until you're quite old. So just need a balance between the two. But again, if I put that thing about the stages that people go through with their money. And actually, it's quite relevant for a number of these questions where it's like, it sort of depends on which stage you're at. Because if you're in the foundation stage, then putting money into your super, so if you're just getting started, putting money into your super is going to be a complete disaster, because that's the money that you want to be using to buy your first property or your first investment property at the earliest possible opportunity. Whereas if you fast forward and you're getting into some of those middle or later stages, and it's like you've already got an investment property or a couple, you've got a plan around your own home, or maybe you've even got it already, you've got a share portfolio cranking, then yeah, cranking money through your super, 100%. That seems like a great idea. So yeah, I suppose it just, what stage are you at, and then that will sort of dictate. I'm not a big fan of individual stocks. I don't like individual stocks because they lack diversification, and that can be a real issue. Also, who's picking the stocks? Like, is it you or me? Because I wouldn't back myself to do it. Some people might, but I would call that overconfidence, if I'm being totally transparent, because the statistics show that even the professional investors failed to perform as well as an index fund more than 80% of the time. And so even if you are a professional investor, more than 8 out of 10 times you're going to be better off with an index fund than you are by picking your own stocks. And so if you're not a professional investor, my guess is that the proportion of you being worse off is going to be more. Hope that helps. I think maybe that you couldn't type that question into the Q&A because your question was too long, maybe. All right. So how you actually plan around FIRE, I'll talk you through the steps and the key considerations here. Your spending and saving plan is absolutely crucial. And so talking about how you allocate your money, and then I'll talk about our approach to banking that I follow myself personally, and we do a lot with our clients. Essentially, you've got two choices when you're allocating your cash. It's like you're spending today or you're spending in the future. Your future stuff is your savings and investments. When you invest, though, you're buying shares, property, super, or these are investments that go up and down over time. And so the key is, if you want to get good results, you want to make sure that when you put money into those investments, that you don't need to bring it back the other way. And how you make sure you're never forced to sell investments at a bad time is you make sure that all of the spending that you want or need to do is provided for. Because if you've got enough money to do all of the spending that you want or need to do, then it goes without saying that you're never going to have to sell your investments because you've got enough money to do all the spending that you need. And so that's why your budget, I don't like the B word, but your budget is so important as a starting point, because it sort of tells you what you can comfortably invest. Now, I think that there's a lot of misconceptions with this stuff, and a lot of people get things a little bit wrong, I suppose, that they think that it needs to be harder. It's about pinching pennies. Doesn't need to be. It's just about having a clear structure. And saving is about, setting your wealth targets. It gets you there faster. It helps you figure out and use the 5% rule to actually nail it with this stuff. But then the next piece is that you've got to be investing. You've got to invest to build your momentum, and leverage is a winning strategy. So borrowing to invest is a winning strategy, particularly once you already own property and the value of your property increases. There's this magical thing called equity that's created, or that's present, and the banks will actually lend you money against the increase in value of a property and allow you to go buy more investments without using a single dollar of your own money. Now, debt does come with risk, and that risk is really, really important to manage. And this is why it's so crucial that you have a rock solid financial plan. But for a lot of people, and particularly once you start building some good momentum, that can be managed and managed well. Shares win from income. And look, it's worth noting that your investing strategy will transition, because for a lot of people, trying to use leverage and buying investment property is a great way to kickstart your wealth building, to build up your net asset position. But at some point, and particularly if you want to fire at the earliest possible opportunity, at some point, you're going to want to sell all of those properties, all of your investment properties at least, and then get all of your money into share type investments, because that's what's going to give you the biggest income. You probably, particularly if you're one of these people that wants to fire and wants to do it as soon as they can, you're not going to want to be running investment properties in your portfolio at that point in time. You may use them to get you there faster, but you're not going to actually want them then because it's going to mean lower income for you. And so this is the process that you can use to actually plan with your money. This is the process that we use at Pivot Wealth, but it's the same process that anyone can really use. That if you want to set things out, it's like first clarify all of the moving parts, what's going on, what are the things that you've got to work with. Map out your strategy or your baseline, and from there, put it together into an action plan. So you know exactly what steps you need to follow or take to take you from where you are to where you want to be. Automate as much as you can. And then it's about executing and refining. And that's where this ongoing process comes in. Now, what this process allows you to do, and particularly looking at the numbers, it allows you to balance the numbers against the emotion of the decisions that you're making, of the investments that you're making, of the purchases that you're making. And like the numbers are important, how you feel is important, but the right one is the combination of those two things. Prioritization is really key here. So choosing the priorities that are most important to you. I've got this great quote from James Clear that says, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And if you want to fire and you're serious about this stuff, you need to systemize your success. Have a saving system, investing system, debt repayment system, a planning system, so that you're doing this following the process, following the bouncing ball, setting your targets, following the path to get there, optimizing your strategy. You need to systemize that because it won't just happen on its own. Done a lot of work with professional athletes, and the thing that sets professional athletes apart from non-professional athletes is that they have good systems and structures around what they actually do with their training, their nutrition, their all of the different things that make them get to that elite level. And so the next thing that you want to be aware of with this is that tax is the biggest opportunity and the biggest potential roadblock. Like if you're serious about FIRE, then by definition, you're going to be building tens of thousands of dollars, maybe $100,000 or more of investment income over time. And so paying a little bit of tax versus paying more than a little bit in tax is going to impact how quickly you make progress and how fast you get to that financial independence. And so the after-tax return when you invest is the only return that matters, rather. It's also worth noting that you only get one tax rate. You get one tax rate for all of your employment income, your bonus or overtime income or commissions, your dividend income from your share portfolio, interest income from your bank account, rental income from your investment properties. It all adds up to one number, which is your assessable income number, and then it gets taxed at your marginal tax rate. But here's the thing, when it comes to investments, you don't need to own all of your investments. And the tax rates are different for different entities. What I mean, and that's, sorry to give you a bit of jargon, but an entity is basically just anything with a tax file number. So every person has their own tax file number. They are their own tax entity. And so when you own an investment account in your name, you pay tax at personal marginal tax rates. And I've got the tax rates here. First 18 grand that you earn, you don't pay any tax. Then 18,000 to 45,000, you pay 16 cents in tax, then 30 cents in tax, then 37%, then 45% on income earned above $190,000. But as I said, you don't have to own all of your investments. You can invest through your super fund, which was to one of the questions that we had. You can invest also through a company, through a bond, through an investment bond, or through a trust. And each of them have different tax rates that are attached to them. Super pays a maximum tax rate of 15%. Companies pay a tax rate of 30%. Bonds pay a maximum tax rate of 30%, but they don't pay any capital gains tax on investments if you hold them for 10 years or more. And then trust, the main rule with trust is that a trust is required to distribute its income to other taxpayers, and they pay tax at their marginal tax rate. And so when you invest, and I speak to a lot of people when it comes to saving tax, and they're like, what can I do to cut my tax bill? This, that, and the other. They're trying to buy some extra paper clips to get their tax bill down. But that has a small impact. And I'm not saying to ignore that, but investing is the much, much bigger opportunities. And the more savings you have and the more wealth you have, the more beneficial that it is. And so I've got this example here showing just a simple example showing if you have investment income of $100,000 a year, if you own the income in your personal name and pay tax at the top marginal tax rate, you're going to pay $47,000 a year in tax. If you were to instead own the investments through a company or through a bond, you pay tax at 30%, which is $30,000 a year. So basically, in this case, the tax saving of investing through another tax entity compared to your personal marginal tax rate is $17,000. That's per annum. So that's an extra 17 grand that you can then reinvest to grow your investments faster in next year's. And if you've got bigger goals, you can see that the savings get gigantic and it happens quite quickly. And so you want to be smart with this stuff. This is a little snapshot from a tool that we use with our planning clients to show, investing in bonds, trusts, companies, your own name, showing the difference in the outcomes. Don't worry too much if you can't see the detail here, but looking at the different tax implications, because it sort of changes around over time, depending on, how much money you're putting in, what entities you're considering using. But looking at this stuff is really important. And I will just say, last piece on tax is that before I jump into these mistakes, is that it's difficult and very expensive to restructure things after you've built up your wealth. So you want to be smart with your investing and tax before you build up too much behind you. All right, guys, I'm going to crank into a few mistakes and then I'm going to jump into some questions. I keep those questions coming. I can see a bunch of them coming through. And so biggest mistake I see, inconsistent savings, an inconsistent focus on savings as a habit. Good habits are hard to form. They're really easy to break. And so creating consistency at whatever level is sustainable for you is really important. Trying to shoot the lights out with investing is another one that people are naturally drawn to get to want to chase these big returns. That's completely natural, but it is quite problematic when it comes to your investing strategy because the more risk you have, the more risk there is of something going wrong. Tax planning after building your wealth is another one, which I was just talking about, and being unclear on your trajectory, total disaster, in my opinion. Last one is making choices in isolation, second last one rather. Every decision, and you can see it's evidenced by a number of the questions that we've had through the chat today. It's like, is this good or is it not good? But it's like, what stage are you at? What else is going on with your money? What does the future hold for you? That's what's going to tell us whether it's good or not. And so looking at those stages again is key. Subtle, not subtle plug for my book, which unpacks all those stages and exactly what you should be thinking about at each of them as well. It's worth a look. And the last one is trying to do it all yourself. It's impossible. Money is so complicated. You can't do it all on your own. You need a dream team behind you. And the right dream team is going to benefit you so much more than what you're going to pay them for their services. I can tell you for sure. All right, guys. Next steps. I'm going to just crank into some questions here, but I'll just share this. I borrowed this from Alex Hormozy, who I saw online, was talking about it in a marketing context, but it gave me an idea to talk about how not to get rich. Few things here. Working a whole bunch of different things at the same time when it comes to your money. Try and focus on your saving strategy, super, buying a property, investing, learning about cryptocurrency all at the same time. Only ever focus for short periods of time. So don't do it consistently. Don't do it over the long term. Just focus in bursts. Don't seek out help. Make all the mistakes yourself and don't learn from those mistakes. Just repeat them over again and again. And so what I will say, guys, because everyone makes mistakes, that is a natural part of learning. But learning means making a change to how you do things. So if you want to build real wealth, you basically just need to do the opposite of all that stuff that I just said. Focus in limited areas, work over the long term, get support, learn from others' mistakes, don't repeat your mistakes, and grow and develop over time. And once again, guys, making the right move for the right stage that you're at. Choosing good investments is an important part of nailing it with your money, but it's not enough. That if you want to be really successful, it's about much, much more than choosing good investments. And money is a momentum game. You take it, the first step is the hardest. Once it's taken, you start building momentum. You can build on that momentum to take the next steps and make it easier. And you don't need to know it all to right now, that see that put a lot of people off as well. That people go, oh, I need to know everything about tax and investing in order to get started. But you don't need to know that. You just need to know enough to take the next step, because once you take that step, you're going to learn from that, and it makes the next steps, your next steps, happen faster and easier, and it makes you more effective over time as well. And so I'll leave you with this quote from Derek Sivers. It says, if information was the answer, we'd all be billionaires with perfect abs. I hope you guys have got a bunch of great ideas out of what we've covered today. But if you want to get results, you need to take action. You need to actually do some stuff here. Now, we've got a ton of content and events and stuff, as I mentioned as well. But we know that there's only so much you can get from that free content as well. This stuff, the sort of things that we're talking about today, this is our bread and butter and what we do at Pivot Wealth. So I'm actually just putting a link into the chat here that says it's a link to our calendar that we do these 10-minute money focus chats. If you want to talk about what the opportunities are for you, give you a bit of no BS Q&A and understand what your next steps are and how you can get started, you can check that out through the link in the chat. I will just mention that there's only a handful of slots because seems like something's in the air at the moment that a lot of people are keen to get help with their money. But so there's a few slots that are available through that link that I've just popped into the chat. If by the time you click on the link that there is no slots left, know that we do release more slots every single day at midnight. And so that's how our calendar works, that we only allow our calendar to book out a couple of weeks in advance. So basically, I think it's at midnight that more slots will be released for the next week. So if you want to, or the next day or whatever. So if you save that link, it will get you there as well. All right, guys. So I'll leave that up, and I'm just going to crank into some of these questions. Again, I can see a ton there, so I'm going to try and answer as many as I can. For principal place of residence, can you still do a reverse mortgage to get some cash flow? Is there a limit? Need to be old or retire? No, 100% you can do that. It's just that the reverse mortgage people will take security over your property. But yeah, reverse mortgages are still definitely a thing. Would it be better to use first home buyer incentives to access property market earlier than pay off hard and look to debt recycle, or save money for longer and direct savings directly to investment property later? Look, I think buying property sooner rather than buying property later is generally going to result in more asset growth over time. If you're focusing on any sort of other investing or other strategies, you just need to balance your cash flow, and that's where the planning piece is all important. But I'd be gunning to get in there at the earliest possible opportunity. Making sure, though, that the one caveat is that you've got to choose a quality property that will grow for the long term. What would you prefer between investment property, a geared ETF, or margin loan to buy shares? Well, I think perhaps I just answered that with that, but investment property is going to get you a bigger investment. So geared ETF or a margin loan to buy a geared ETF, all great, but it's not going to probably have the same impact as a property, because a property will be 5 times the size. What do you mean by risk management when talking about property? Great question. Sorry if I skipped over that. What I mean by that is that, like, we've just been through this fast interest rate tightening cycle. So making sure that you're protected from a cash flow perspective if something changes externally, like interest rates. Also that you're protected if something changes in your circumstances. And lifestyle risk is something that I see quite a lot, that people, when they're thinking about like starting a family, they often haven't thought about they can afford an investment property today, but they don't think about the fact that they want to have 1, 2, or 3 kids over the next handful of years. And that's going to mean maternity leave, paternity leave, daycare costs, and those sorts of things. So just managing all of those risks in the strategy, because once you buy a property, you need to make that mortgage payment month on month on month, regardless of what's going on with you and what's going on with the world. So just making sure that you can do that is the key. Is there a case where positively geared property is better than negatively geared? Well, that's an interesting question. So typically what happens with property is that a lot of cases, if you buy properties in like more regional or rural areas, they will tend to have higher rental return rates, but lower growth rates, and be more likely to be positively geared. Now, that doesn't hold across the whole property market. I know, I'm sure someone's going to say something about that, but Yeah, that's something to be in mind. And for me, that the big benefit that you get from buying a property is around the capital growth, the capital appreciation over time, as opposed to the income, particularly when you're trying to build your wealth and investments. And so, yeah, I think that's the thing. Once you've accumulated a whole bunch of wealth, then you might want to have positively geared properties or higher income yielding properties because you're more focused on the income and you're less focused on building your assets. So I hope that helps. Uh, Hey, what's your take on rent vesting? Love rent vesting. I think it's awesome. Do it myself. We help with a lot of our clients. It's not, in my opinion, it's a bit weird that the tax rules are like that, but the tax rules are like that. And so I want to take full advantage. Plus, it gives you a lot of flexibility as well, too. Guys, I'll stick around and I can see that there's a few more questions. I'll do as many as I can. Trung says, if you're currently rent vesting, it's a good segue from my last point. What point in your financial path are you planning to implement an exit strategy? Are you never going to sell your investments and keep rent vesting? Now, look, at some point I'll buy a property when I can do that without a mortgage that's higher than I want it to be. And with a clear path to actually paying it off. And once I've in the early days, see, I'm using my borrowing capacity to buy investments. At the moment, my focus is on using that borrowing capacity to buy more investments. And I don't want to sort of like waste my borrowing capacity buying my own home. At some point, that will shift because I have more borrowing capacity than I want for the purposes of investing. And at that point, I'll start looking more closely at it as well. All right, just going to take a couple more. Instead of one from Michelle, instead of purchasing shares via a joint account, is it better to invest as an individual who has a lower marginal tax rate? That can be quite beneficial, Michelle. So it's definitely worth you taking a look at. It depends, though, how tax rates will change over time as well. And so if you've got like someone that's on a lower tax rate because they're on maternity leave, but then they're going to end up in a higher tax rate, then that can be tricky as well, or just a consideration, I suppose, in making the decisions. And so, yeah, you want to look today, but also be looking into the years ahead as well. I'll just take one more question. You mentioned fire strategies, owning the house you live in and having investments as income, but could you build your investment portfolio and rent vest the rest of your life and get the same outcome? Yes, you could. Yeah. But at some point, like particularly when you're really old, you probably want to own the property that you're living in, but you don't have to. So you 100%, as long as you've got enough investments to fund your rent, then you can 100% keep renting a property forever and just rock your investments. Awesome, guys. Well, look, that's been great. Loving all the questions. So nice one. A nice one on sticking around as well. Guys, check out our upcoming events. Would love to see you there. If you really had a burning question that I didn't answer, feel free to hit me up online and we'll get into it. Guys, once again, thanks for being here. I will catch you on the next time. How do I turn this off? Cheers, guys. God, I don't even know how to stop this thing. Peace out.